Okay, now we're recording to the cloud. This is a SIG network meeting for Thursday, March 18th, 2021. Shall we kick it off with issue triage as per usual?
Anybody wants to do it? I have it loaded, but I'm happy to let somebody else take a turn. I don't want to be a triage hog.
Oh, Tim, we love heckling you when you triage. Go
Oh,
for it.
your heckles are so vigorous. All right, where is it? Let's hope. Oh, it's always a crapshoot. Am I going to choose the right window?
We'll tell you if you don't.
Are you seeing the issues list or my plan for world domination?
World domination.
World domination through issues.
Correct.
All right. There were 23 open, but actually I closed a couple. So there's actually 17 open now. A bunch of folks, thank you all for doing your pre-homework. We're going through and pinging and updating and circling back. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 that we should look at. And I have a feeling that today is Antonio's day because 6 of the 9 are flaky tests.
But there is an issue. Something is happening, when this freeze starts. So there was an issue with the instrumentation, this logging thing. What's the name? This logging that was doing, I don't know the name. Well, it was panicking and causing issues with the kubelet. There is another issue with the node too that is causing delays, and when the CI is slower than usual, the first things to fail are the SIG network test and the SIG storage.
Okay. So maybe all of these are.
I have to review all of them, but what I tell them is, if it only fails once and in one job, it's not. I mean, it's not worth to spend the time on it. I'm monitoring every day the SIG network dashboard.
Okay.
Having these failures. So
they all look similar. No endpoints, failed to connect, not reachable, timeout.
Because when it's that way, when something is slower than usual in Kubernetes, SIG network tests are going to fail. But
should we be? I mean, I hate timeouts as a solution to test flakes, but honestly, a bunch of our tests are do something and wait for the system to respond and then prove that it worked eventually. Like, do we expand our definition of eventually?
No, I was working with Voitech a lot on that. So right now, all the tests always expect a pod to be created. So right now, all the tests, or at least the test that I found, are waiting for the pod to be ready. It's not running, it's ready. So then, when that condition happens, the next step starts. The other thing that we had out of sync problems was with, we were not waiting that the points were ready, so
right.
That's the other thing that we fixed. But there are times that those timeouts, I don't know if it's IP tables or what it is, those timeouts are not enough. You can see there.
Yeah.
Waiting to program the rules or whatever thing,
We
cannot expand. We cannot go beyond 2 minutes to have an endpoint ready. These are not PMs.
Yeah, I mean, that really does say that something else is wrong, right? But it's always us that is taking the brunt of it. So I wonder if it.
No, SIG storage is worse. So, now, I'm tracking this with Benjamin and SIG testing and Jordan. So if
all right, well, then
I find that I need help or something is wrong or something is suspicious, I will flag it and send an email or something. But
okay, well then there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of those that are new this week.
Wait. This
one's an old one.
This is something, and I see Lars is here, that we should talk later. Okay.
Okay. So go ahead. Sorry.
No, the thing is, IPVS is something that it was a long time, but my feeling is that nobody is taking care of it. So as a community, we should take a decision on what we want to do with it.
I know you raised this issue in Slack. Is it on the agenda for this week?
No, because I was busy with another things.
Do you want to put it on the agenda for the end of today?
I would put it.
Okay. Anyway, Jay, I don't know if you're here, but you volunteered to take this one. And
okay.
Two cycles ago, you signed yourself up.
Wait, okay, I'm gonna look at this today. Yeah, I forgot it. Okay.
Okay. DNS resolution from Windows pods. It looks like Windows was updated and something that used to work doesn't work anymore.
This could very easily be related to the Windows OS or them not having a patch updated. Is this Windows assigned on this? Okay.
This was, I think, the most damning statement.
Yeah.
James Stravant works for Microsoft, and he owns the G Stravant. If he's assigned, he should be able to.
Yeah, I'll ping James.
Okay.
You can, I think, unassign SIG network if you want. I think this is probably a Windows issue, but whatever.
Here we have this probes issue from last cycle. Cal, you signed up to follow up on it.
Okay, shame on me. I completely forgot. Sorry.
It's okay. And this is the issue report of having wrong IP tables config under churn with external traffic policy and lots of endpoints. I agree with Casey's assessment. It does seem like it's at least plausibly a bug. The question then is, what can we do about it if it's so hard to reproduce? We can throw it into the hopper with all the other bugs, or if somebody feels like they want to spend a little time poking around, they could think about what logs can we add now so that the next time this pops up, it's epsilon easier to debug. So before I throw it into the hopper, I thought it was worth just putting out here, like, does anybody want to go take a stroll through kubeproxy and add some logs and or metrics? Good first project. Not really.
Yeah, what metrics? We have interesting metrics in kubeproxy with the latency to program the rules and this thing.
Yeah, I don't know what the right logs or metrics would be here. I'm more like, understand what the bug purports to be experiencing, and then see if there were some strategically placed logs that we could add that would say, aha, that list is not supposed to be empty, or something like that.
Okay, I got your point. Yeah, so.
But I have no idea. I have no better guidance to give.
Maybe we can tag that. Can we convert this issue into that issue or make a new issue for that?
For what?
For what you just said.
Oh, I mean, I think it is this issue. I don't think we need to have two separate issues.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, unless you mean just to make it more approachable to people, but I think adding logs is in the context of this.
Yeah, like that's when, yeah, maybe just add a comment there that, like, as a way to resolve this issue, why don't we just say we'll add logs and metrics as a way to detect this, and then, because you're right, that would be a cool first project.
I was sort of kidding. I actually think it feels like it needs a fair amount of context to be able to find the right places, but I'll add.
I think in general, there's a lot of stuff we could, get into.
All right, well, we'll leave that. It is currently accepted as a bug. And we'll see if it reproduces.
If you add help wanted, a lot of people is watching that, mainly from Asia, because they reach out to me in my mornings, you know.
All right, I will add help wanted. I'm worried that it's going to be difficult for people to approach, but if they want to give it a shot, who am I to say no, right?
I have 2 persons that reach out, and I can guide if they are
Okay.
in my time zone. I can help people.
Come on.
Yeah.
Excellent. That's it. That's all the issues we got, unless you want to go back through older issues now. I mean, go through already triaged issues. Let's go to the agenda, and if we feel like we want to kill some more time at the end, we can.
Sounds like a good idea. Jay, you are up next. I assume that's you with the letter J.
Oh, I had one. Oh, I was actually doing this by proxy for Fengyan. Let me see. Let me open this doc here. Where is it? Where is it? Oh yeah, Antonio. What should we do about this? I'm kind of the middleman here. I'm just like looking at this, and this whole thing about how endpoints are reconciled is pretty confusing to me. But is there something that needs to be done here, or do we consider? First of all, do we consider this idea that the endpoints controller doesn't fully reconcile everything for these headless services? Do we consider that a bug, or is that just something that isn't documented? I guess is the question.
Let me add context, because we discussed this before. I don't know, 1 week before with Rob Scott and Tim in another issue. So the thing is, when you create a service with a selector with pods, it creates endpoints, and the person wants to remove the selector and modify the endpoint or something like that. No, wants to modify the endpoint, but then it starts to fight with the endpoints controller. So what we discussed is that the endpoints controller doesn't react to the endpoints updates. So it never. I forget now.
Either one of the endpoints or endpoint slice controller does react and the other one doesn't, right?
The endpoints controller owns the endpoints object. So there is no problem. Nobody can modify it, or you can modify it, and after a few seconds, it comes back to the endpoint address controller. But with the endpoint controller, you can modify the object. And this person want to mod. I don't want to. I don't know exactly what he wants to do, but he wants to do something that the endpoints controller doesn't allow here.
Yeah, I forget the context. I even forget, was it on Slack or was it on mailing list, or was there an issue?
In an issue.
What does it not react to exactly?
Okay, it's this thing. So he removes the service proxy label.
It looks like Fengyan is actually here. So what's up, Fengyan?
Hey, I just joined.
Hey, yeah, so we were just talking about you. Okay, we're looking at your issue here with the endpoints.
What's the issue number?
Oh, is this the right issue?
98577.
Sorry, say it one more time.
I'll go 98577.
Yeah, so Fengyan, what was the idea here? Like, what was the overall goal you had? I wasn't really aware of the overall context. I just reproduced it and noticed that it was true, and that was it.
Yeah, so the use case is a selector list service is created, and a corresponding endpoint is also created by a controller. And and the controller adds a proxy label on the service and the endpoints. But when the controller reacts to certain events and removes the labels from the endpoint, the IP table rule that drops the traffic still stays there.
So and tell me if I'm getting this right. There was a change made to the endpoints object, which switches it from don't manage me to yes, manage me, but we're not catching that edge.
Exactly. And based on the discussion in that ticket, it seems like it's because the update event on the endpoint, it's not like reconciled by its endpoint controller at all. So if you update the endpoints to remove the label, nothing will happen basically. From the controller's perspective, the service doesn't have an endpoint. So it just keeps the IP table rule there to jog the traffic for that service.
I may be oversimplifying this, but if I've read through this correctly, this is a non-issue for endpoint slice. And because endpoint slice like the controller actually clearly owns the resource and updates and everything like that. And endpoint slice, I think, is covering most of our supported versions now. So maybe this is not an issue with supported OSS Kubernetes versions. I don't know. That may be a cheap way out, but if kubeproxy isn't actually watching endpoints anymore by default, I don't know.
Can you say more about why someone's doing this?
Yes. So, I mean, in the downstream application, we are basically customizing the service and the endpoints and populating the endpoints with some VM IPs.
Okay.
That's why we are controlling this endpoint, and the service is created without the selector. And in certain scenarios, we want to disable kubeproxy. So that's why we are using this label on the service. And I guess that controller automatically syncs everything from the service to the endpoint. I mean, our own controller. So the service proxy name label gets added on the endpoint as well. But as that label is removed later, the service is still like unavailable from the user's perspective because of the IP table rule.
Right. And the service itself has no selector, you said?
No, it doesn't have any selector.
So even if you wanted, so you suddenly want kubeproxy to manage it, even though you put the endpoints there yourself, right? So the endpoint controller doesn't matter. It's all about kubeproxy.
Yes, that's true. Yeah.
So Rob, in the endpoint slice mirroring world, wouldn't the mirroring controller pick this up and copy it into a slice?
It would, but it would copy every bit of the label that was. If I may be misunderstanding this, but it sounds like an undesirable label is ending up on endpoints resource, and that would be copied across to endpoint slice.
But then it's being removed, and it's not being removed from the mirror?
It should be.
Yes.
I guess that's the test then, right? If we're willing to say kubeproxy support for endpoints, classic endpoints, is going down the tubes, then that's fine. But I think this scenario should work through the mirroring controller. Can we confirm that it does or doesn't?
Yeah, I think it should. I am curious too if you're able to test this on Kubernetes 1.19 or above, or well, 1.18 with the feature enabled, if the same thing happens.
I'll throw a comment at the end of this this bug with a little bit of a summary of this discussion Fengon, does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. Thank you.
If it doesn't work, then we should probably fix that.
Yeah. And if my understanding is correct, we're also trying to say if endpoint slice fixes this, or I mean, it doesn't have this issue at all. Maybe we can just switch to endpoint slice. Is my understanding correct?
Yes. We included this thing called the endpoint mirroring controller to make it possible for people who were doing what you're doing and manually writing to endpoints, which is a simpler API, and have that still propagate through into endpoint slices. But if you go straight to slices, then you shouldn't have this problem at all.
Gotcha. We'll evaluate that approach as well. But at the same time, I do like want to see the progress on the endpoint controller. What's our conclusion there?
Okay, I'll add some notes at the end of this issue.
Awesome, thank you.
Thanks, guys. So we had a few things tacked on here mid-meeting.
Like, is this an E2E that needs to be created for this like event at some point to like verify this behavior? Because I feel like we could translate one pretty easily from the way this is like the best bug report ever. Like it would be really easy to, I think, basically create an E2E that did this.
There is a need to test the label service proxy name.
Okay.
Yeah, E2E feels really heavy for that. I mean, we could have a simple unit test within the mirroring controller to make sure that it gets mirrored properly, and a test within kubeproxy to make sure that we actually catch that that edge, that change in label.
Yeah. Okay.
Tim, did you want to talk about cluster Cider next?
Oh, we're already at that point? Okay. So we have this old issue from 2017 filed by, I closed the window already, but I think Brian Borum. And it basically comes down to cluster Cider as a property of the cluster is not queryable in any way. And it would be nice if it could be. The
Isn't that
rebuttal.
also the case for service Cider?
Yes.
I thought there were some ways to get it, but they were very icky and not supported.
That's almost certainly correct.
Okay.
The rebuttal for primarily for the cluster Cider, but service Cider, well, no, service Cider less so. The cluster Cider is an optional thing, right? Like any CNI or network implementation could choose not to use it at all, right? And in fact, we know some that don't, or we know some that have multiple cluster Ciders, and so it's difficult to stick that somewhere, and we don't have any obvious place to stick it, first of all, and even if we did, it would have to be a list, and that would impose on all these existing implementations that they keep that list up to date, right? So the issue sort of got stuck and aged out and was going to be auto deleted, and then was snatched from the jaws of the FetaBot. And the question is, do we want to reopen that consideration? I know the new context that I bring was, we know that last year there were some changes to kubeproxy to decouple it from cluster Cider so that we could have use node Cider instead, so we have less things aware of the cluster Cider. So it is at least technically possible now to have multiple cluster Ciders that are not contiguous to each other, right? And the question is still, do we want to expose that? Considering there's also a proposal somewhere, I forget if it was in a CAP yet, to add multiple Ciders to the range allocator. And if we were going to add them to the range allocator, it sort of feels like it shouldn't be a flag anymore, because flags are difficult to change at runtime. So we would probably want to have some sort of resource in the cluster that represented an IP range, and Antonio, tell me if this starts to sound familiar, some sort of resource in the cluster that represents an IP range and some way to allocate from that IP range. So given that, and I know I'm picking on Antonio for anybody who hasn't followed along because he spent some time thinking about how to make the service IPs follow a similar pattern. If we were to follow a road like that, then this old bug doesn't actually seem so impossible anymore, because we would actually have perhaps enough gravity together to justify the resource and the work needed to do it. That said, I have no idea if those APIs actually align. Antonio, I promised you we will circle back to thinking about how to make that API work. So I don't have any real update other than it doesn't seem so impossible now.
Then we need to really disjoin change from exposure of the configuration. There are 3 different problems, and each one of them is a serious amount of work on its own. I understand we want to tackle the 3 eventually and complete them all, but each one of them is like a dragon hidden somewhere, and it will come out and eat everything alive and so on. So it's like the disillusion of smog, kind of. So I want to disjoin the exposure of the configuration from the idea of multiple disjoint ranges, from the idea of dynamically changing ciders. So, and I think in sequence, I think they are pretty much the same way I said. The multiples and then exposure, or exposures and multiple, and then at the end, the tail end of this is the change. For the record, I think cloud providers and anybody who's working on dynamically creating clusters in response to events will love a feature like that, because currently it's a mess. Every cloud provider and everybody who's providing an API to create cluster is asking the user to do the due diligence of non-overlapping ciders and all that crap. So if we can expose this for them, they would love it, because it makes their life a lot easier.
So in an ideal world, nobody would ever ask this question, because they wouldn't, like, we should position it as a non-meaningful thing. And I think we've successfully done that for kube proxy, right? It doesn't need to know anymore, right? So if the goal here was just to publish, I think we can hand wave and say, you don't need to know that. It's the wrong question to be asking, right? So I'm not sure that your step 1 is useful without step 2 and 3.
Can I make the argument to have step 1 and 2 and then 3 separately?
Remind me what step 2 was?
It's what the multi-range, disjoint ranges, and the exposure, like expose as an API. I can group those as one work unit, fine, but leave the change away from this.
So, sorry.
No, you go ahead, Antonio.
No, the thing is, if we allow to do more things with the subnets, we are doing exactly the opposite that we are saying. So because people is going to add more networking configuration, and that is more dependency on knobs.
As a follow-on to that, besides, well, kubeproxy doesn't use it anymore. Besides the node cider allocator, what uses cluster cider in a cluster right now, or what kube components use it?
I think that's it.
The node IPAM in the controller.
Yeah, the node IPAM splits it, and for each new node, and the cluster cider use it because there is a rule around like denetting traffic and all of that.
But did we get rid of that, or does kubelet still have any dependency on it for the mask marking stuff? No? Okay.
I don't think kubelet does, and it's still in kube proxy, but you can disable it by switching the local detector mode, right?
So
I think it's the node IPAM.
Uses it is the node IPAM.
Now that said, like node IPAM is in use in a lot of places, so it's not like we can wave a wand and make it go away.
I want to highlight that statement that yes, people shouldn't worry about that, but The fact is, people worry about that. I'll tell you why. Most of the people, at least on the cloud environment, they try to configure with the native cloud networking, CNI kind of stuff, like provide IP support from the VNet and all of that. And this information is not saved anywhere. So having a cluster, having this as an information might be useful. The argument I'm trying to make here is these scenarios where this data is used is outside a single cluster. So that's where it's tricky to say, oh yes, people need that or not. Again, I will like the hell of change is going to be a hell I die on. I'm not saying we shouldn't do it. I'm just saying let's get the things out of the door first, and then we can work on the change part, because the change part is ugly.
So there is, I believe there's a cap. We'll make this the end of this discussion soon. There is a cap to add. There's 2 caps open around the IPAM node allocator. One to allow different sized ciders, and one to allow discontiguous multiple ciders. They both are interesting and useful for people to manage this subsystem, even though I wish we didn't have to. There's open questions about whether we should try to fix the node allocator in place, or whether we should actually add a newer, more modern one with a different representation and evolve that way. If we add multi-cider, then I feel like we have to go to a resource-based model to configure it, because we can't tell people go and edit your flags, because in a hosted world, that just isn't viable, right? So I think at that point, it becomes conjoined.
I agree.
Cool. So next, hopefully in the next round of furious revising of KEPs in order to get it into the KEP freeze, one of these will be in there.
Yeah. Also, I vote yes on modern controller for the IPAM. The reason behind that, the old controller is convoluted and there is big if statement around certain cloud providers that shouldn't be there. So modifying this and testing this might not be as easy as it looks. So if we can leave this as a feature and similar to what we've done with endpoint slice, and then eventually retire the old one.
I yield my time.
Thank you, Tim. Our agenda has a few more things on it that popped up. I think Antonio wanted to talk about IPVS kubeproxy and the future of that.
Yes, because usually Lars is in the call. Lars, Andrew, one guy from Datadog, they were active and working, fixing bugs. And I think that in the later releases, the working IPVS is slowing down, and I don't know if because people is stopping to use it or not, but I want to raise this topic before, in 2 releases, nobody's using it, and we are, having one component that is not working, or, if we have it in 3, we should maintain it. And I just wanted to know the opinion of the people, if they are still using it, if they don't plan to use anymore, what should we do with it?
Is any of the regular maintainers of the IPVS stack here? To be fair, we didn't put it on the agenda until 10 seconds ago, so they may not have known to appear. I see Lars here. Lars, are you paying attention?
Yeah.
Have any thoughts?
About IPVS kubeproxy here?
Yeah,
Or...
like, do you feel, if I can be a little bit more dramatic than Antonio, do do you feel it's in good repair and good maintainership, or do you feel like it's decaying?
No, I think it's in good shape. I don't know any serious matters about it. What is the concern? Do you have any issue that I can check?
We have, there is only one job, and it has a failing test for, I don't know, I cannot say, 1 month, 2 months, I don't remember. And I was doing some triage this weekend, and I see a lot of new open issues, and nobody replying on that. So I see that some people that used to work there is moving to eBPF. So I just want to raise this before we end with a component that nobody cares. Just one person wants it. I think that is enough, but I mean, we should understand what is the situation.
Yeah, I can check the issues. Are there flaking tests or something? Because I usually skip those.
The test is not flake, it's failing.
Antonio, can you provide a link so that Lars can take a look? And maybe if we still think this is a risk, then we can put it on the agenda with some lead time so we can get other people who care about this to come.
Yeah, a list would be good. What the concerns are, and I can have a look at them.
Thank you, Lars. I just see it in the chat now.
I guess this is in the same place as the user space proxy stuff. Like we don't really know if people are really using it that much.
Well, the user space, I'm pretty confident not a lot of people use it. And the people who do use it for a particularly niche case, right, Dan?
Yeah.
IPVS, I think, is much more broadly used. I mean, let's say we have a larger question of, do we have any path to removing anything from these at all, ever? Or are we going to maintain them forever, right?
I have a comment about, generally speaking, about the code base, because that means our trajectory is always at if we don't extract things out, which means eventually this thing is gonna be way more than single group of people can maintain. So for stuff like user proxy, it's user space proxy, it's very obvious that can be extracted alone, have a home for it under the same code base, right? Maintained separately, and people who want to use it, fine, we'll maintain it, like keep it aligned with the API as we go, but any improvement and so on, it should be separate.
I can agree with that, and there is a cap, I believe, or some proposal to break out kube proxy things as a library and an own repository even, and that would make things much easier for other proxies, or break out the IPVS to an entirely separate thing.
So I think the fun part there is, if we want to do one, we need to do all, right? I think we can make a reasonable statement of kube proxy as a monolithic thing is effectively frozen. Like, we'll take security issues and bug fixes and those sorts of things, but we're not going to augment it in any major ways. And there's this other thing, and it's the new way of doing it, and that's maybe out of tree, maybe it's like independent by method. So there's one for IP tables, one for IPVS, and one for user space, and that's the new way of doing things. the problem is if we kick one out but leave the rest in, then I think it's where we have troubles saying exactly how we're going to support it and justify that. But moving to a bunch of disparate projects, we have to think through, and I honestly just don't have the answer for it, of what does that mean for users who assemble a cluster today? We'll have to think about the life cycle and turn up and maintenance, imposition that would put on people. That's my biggest concern. And in no way am I saying it's impossible, just that we haven't really put time into it.
If we broke it up into chunks, at least for the user space stuff, like you said, I mean, not a lot of people use it. So isn't the risk, you have half the amount of code to worry about. You're reducing code from core and you're not really hurt. I don't know. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're not. Some of these big things never get done is what I'm saying, I guess, right? Like maybe if we started small.
Well, sorry, go ahead.
The problem here is not a number of lines of code. It's a problem of maintenance. If people use it and it has bugs and we don't solve it, or if it doesn't have any test, or if you have to add a feature and you have to add to IPVS too, and you really don't care. So that's the thing, it's having 2,000 lines of code is really not the biggest problem. Is what do we want to do with our components, and are we going to add now topology? We need to add it
exactly.
Yes, too. And if nobody's using it, it's complicated, and we don't have too much test. So maybe you add the feature and it's not working, and somebody's going to use it. What are you going to do? Are we going to support it or not? That's the questions that we should do.
I agree. Topology is a great example, right? As we add more support for this, are we going to add that support to user space or not? And how do we make that, like what principle informs that decision? If it was out of tree, at least we could say it's somebody else's problem and we don't claim to support it. It's not a great answer, but it's better than it's our problem and we just let you down. So I'm excited about the idea of the V2 KEP, and I think it's a good opportunity for us to reevaluate how we distribute kubeproxy, right? And it may be the answer to my biggest concerns are really work together with the kubeadm team to make sure that they know where to pull different most popular options from.
So I guess that's probably not a good option to just remove the user space for now, I guess.
Yes, please don't.
Okay.
I mean, it would have to go through a deprecation cycle, I'm presuming anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't even want to think about what we would have to do to try to remove that right now. I think the V2, I mean, we're not really calling it V2, but the V2 effort is a better opportunity there.
We define an interface and keep the heavy lifting inside the proxy itself. And then the topology becomes a function of filtering endpoints and services and all of that stuff.
Yep.
Then we shouldn't worry about something outside the tree, because their function would be, oh, this is a new service, new endpoint, which pretty much what we do today. It's just not clean cut.
Right.
So because this problem will happen. Let's say we wanted a new BBF proxy, right? And you're smiling, Antonio, I know, because it will happen, right? Let's face it, it's just a matter of time. I'm positive somebody's writing it somewhere and just testing it before they come out with it. So does this mean we're gonna maintain 4 different proxies? All right. And
no,
then
we've already been very clear with people that we're not adding new proxy modes to kubeproxy, right? So we're already in this situation, just sort of haphazardly.
There's already the example of NFTables proxy port that somebody was presenting on. I don't know if they formally proposed it as a PR, but there was movement on that.
They did ask.
No.
Somebody did ask you know, if I wrote an NF tables version, will you take it? And the answer was, we can't ban, we don't have the bandwidth to maintain yet another version that we don't understand deeply.
The other aspect of this is if we keep everything inside the way it is, then anybody implementing proxies, they have to rewrite the entire logic of endpoint slices, filtering,
Yeah.
don't stack, and all of that. So,
well, we can decouple those problems, right? We can turn the V2 stuff into a nice library and tell anybody who wants to go do it. And that's one decision. And the other decision is, are we going to produce a new binary, a V2 binary that has a -- proxy mode flag, or are we going to say, this is the IP tables one, and it's a binary, and this is the IPVS one, and it's a binary, and here's the BPF one, and it's a binary, and you choose which binary you want to run, not which proxy mode flag you're going to pass.
if they are built the same way, yes.
It should be easy. It should be, as I think Ricardo said in the chat, it should be really filling in a bunch of methods on an interface.
That sounds like the cleanest architectural option.
The question is, like, regardless of how we do it, because that might be the easy part. The question is somebody going to own, is somebody actively doing this work, or is this, because that's why I feel like deleting it is kind of like, for a specific case, is not that that's a better solution, but it's like, I know that I could justify that in my day job because I have a very specific reason to want to do that. Question is somebody owning this V2 cap? And if not, maybe that should be our highest priority, is to find somebody who's going to really own finishing this as quickly as possible.
I think that is a wonderful topic for perhaps our next meeting. You know, the Mikhail was working on it, but you know, he's just a contributor. He's just one person. We haven't really stepped up to help him sort of organizationally. Maybe we should make this a SIG level priority for 22 or 23 and see how many people we can get to pitch in on that.
Or is it maybe a sub-project, like a kube proxy sub-project thing where we say, meet once a week, triage the issues, figure out the problem, work on the count.
Right.
A chance to
but actually, like, spending like concerted effort on it as opposed to seeing if it happens while we're not doing anything about it. It's not a plant. It's not going to grow on its own.
Okay, I'll add that to the agenda for next week, because I think everybody agrees. It's just a matter of who's. It's like, yeah. I guess since there's a lot of people here, we're on the call now. Is anybody working on this that's on the call and we don't know? You know what I mean? I don't know.
Now that we are talking about this, is what happened with the Nginx ingress now that Alejandro moved up?
Last I heard, nothing. Last I heard, there was no new maintainer who has stepped up to manage Nginx.
Chris Luciano actually stepped up.
Who did?
I think so. I was following the issue and he stepped up and is maintaining, I think.
Yeah, that's great. I had not heard that.
Okay.
We've got 8 minutes left. Bridget, you were next, but it looks like maybe you resolved it in the minutes.
I think I might have seen a test flake, but I am sitting here waiting more patiently. That's a lie. I'm not at all patient. I'm waiting impatiently, but we can talk about the next item.
Okay. The last item was about issue triage for Kubernetes DNS in the SIG network meetings.
Yep, I added that to the agenda. This is Pavitra. Hopefully this will be quick. So I wanted to check if it would be okay to bring issues that we get at Kubernetes DNS repo for discussion in issue triage that we do in the SIG network meeting. As a quick overview, the Kubernetes DNS houses the source code for kubedns, which used to be the default several releases back, but more importantly, also node local DNS, which is still widely used, and most questions we get are related to node local DNS on that repo. So by bringing those issues here for triage, I think what we would be signing up for is going over them and potentially asking for help for debugging those or like suggestions.
I think it's fair, especially if we're opening this can of worms of moving stuff like kubeproxy out into separate repos. Like, we will have to deal with, there is more than KK to triage.
Right.
Objections?
No objections from me.
I have one question for other repos that aren't in KK. Are we going to need to either add bots, add labels, anything structurally in order to make issue triage feasible?
I think all repos in the org get the triage label automatically now, right? So at least for my process of triage, that's really the only input signal that I'm using.
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. I actually don't see those triage labels automatically applied on the DNS one. I'll check if there's some setup I need to do for that.
Interesting.
But I can do that. At least the bot doesn't get set up. I assume I would have had to do something on my end for it.
Once you have the link isolating the issues you want triage, then I think we would need them in the headers of the SIG network meeting doc.
Got it. Okay. Okay, sure. Yeah. I can follow up on the process to do that. This was more to just find out if the idea is okay with the group here. But yeah, I'll do the digging to get the links up there, and yeah, it's not like we have issues every meeting, but yeah, I will be involved in bringing those lists up whenever we do the triage.
Yeah, let's make it a point that next time we do triage, we'll include the DNS repo.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Well, Tim, it's not much, but I think you get 4 minutes to do your reviews.
Awesome. I'll go read an email instead. Thanks everybody for a wonderful meeting. Always nice to see you.
Thanks.
Bye, everybody.
See you in a couple weeks.
Bye.
Thank you.